The Tuskegee Syphilis Study, Past and Present Impact, Ethical and Legal Issues, and a Path Forward, presented by Julie Beamer. In this presentation, I'll discuss the history, ethical and legal issues, the impact on society and research, and recommendations for mitigation and prevention. The Public Health Service's Tuskegee study of untreated syphilis in the Negro male, most often called the Tuskegee Syphilis Study or Experiment, began in 1932. At the time, there was no available treatment for the sexually transmitted infection except with heavy metals, which didn't always work and was sometimes fatal. The goal of the study: together with physicians, the Public Health Service began this study to learn the long-term natural course of syphilis. It began as an 8-month study, but continued for 40 years. Recruitment of human subjects. 600 men were recruited to be in the study. 399 had active or latent syphilis, and 201 were part of the control group. The men recruited to be participants were poor sharecroppers, often illiterate, with low education attainment. They were promised hot meals with their appointments, blood tests, medical care, and burial insurance. The medical care was to treat minor ailments, not syphilis. Medicare was not often something the poor black sharecroppers had access to, so they really believed they were getting something special. Ethical and legal issues of the Tuskegee Syphilis Study. Deception. The men who were the human subjects or participants were all made to believe they had an ailment that was referred to as bad blood. They were not told they had syphilis or even that the study was research on syphilis. They also believed they were getting treatment for their bad blood when they weren't getting any treatment at all. Lack of informed consent. The men were not told truthfully about their medical condition. They were not given options about treatment or even told about any risks of the study. Additionally, they were not given the freedom to leave the study at any time. Exploitation and mistreatment. While the physicians leading the study were looking to make a name for themselves, the black men were dying. Even when penicillin was discovered in 1947 and was a safe and effective treatment for syphilis, they were denied it. Their names were on a list sent to the Alabama Health Department, so they couldn't get treatment anywhere in the state, though they didn't even know they had syphilis because they were simply told they had bad blood. The participants in the study were being used for whatever information the Public Health Service and their physicians could glean while receiving no benefits. Additionally, the study didn't take into consideration the partners, children, families, and the local community of the participants. Coercion. The men did not enter the study on their own free will. They had been persuaded with the promises of food and medical care and burial insurance. Malpractice, nonfeasance, and negligence. Negligence is carelessness or an oversight and either an act of commission or omission that a reasonably thoughtful person wouldn't have committed. Those in charge of the study deliberately made choices to deny care to the men in the study. This was more than carelessness. Both the Public Health Service, which would later become part of the Center for Disease Control and Prevention, and the physicians directing the study committed acts of nonfeasance when they failed to provide treatment to the men. However, that wasn't a mistake. It was deliberate. Malpractice is legalese for healthcare practitioners who behave or perform in improper and negligent ways. However, criminal negligence may be the best way to describe the actions of the public health service and the physicians. Their indifference towards the men in the study was apparent in their non-treatment for the syphilis, in addition to the lengths they went to in order to prevent the men from getting treatment elsewhere. Equity. There was no equity in the study, as the men who carried the burdens of the study did not reap any of the benefits from it. Additionally, the only men admitted to the study were black men. There were no other men in the study. The selection of human subjects must be free of all bias. The length of the study, as stated previously, the study was initially going to be 8 months long. It lasted 40 years because the public health service and physicians wanted to keep the men in the study until death so they could do autopsies. Even in death, these men had no agency over their own bodies. Bodily autonomy and self-determination. The participants in the study were not given accurate information about their disease, what the study was about, how the study was being conducted, or if they could leave the study. Without proper information, no person has the ability to determine what to do with their own body. Impact of the study on society. Partners and children were immediately impacted by the untreated syphilis as it was transmitted to them by the men in the study. The lack of cultural competence or the disregard of empathy and understanding for the black men was apparent. There were stereotypes about the sexual behaviors and, again, exploitation of the human subjects as they were a vulnerable population. A lasting impact of this unethical study is the mistrust that many black men and many black people in general have of medical professionals. In fact, the Tuskegee syphilis study is often described as the single reason behind the distrust that African Americans feel towards medicine and public health. The study laid the foundation for this mistrust. Black Americans believe that their lives are not valued by white society, and that influences their relationship with the healthcare system. Mitigating risk of a recurrence of unethical research. The news of the Tuskegee syphilis study became public knowledge in 1972. Enabled by the National Research Act of 1974, the National Commission for the Protection of Human Subjects of Biomedical and Behavioral Research released the Belmont Report. The goal of the Belmont Report was to balance the need for advancement of medical knowledge with the need to protect the dignity, privacy, and self-determination of the human subjects. Risks to participants needed to be minimized, and regardless of potential benefits, if it was too risky, it could not continue. Institutional review boards would need created to ensure research studies would be ethical and follow the 3 requirements set forth in the report, and I'll get to those next. The institutional review boards would consist of people not directly involved with the study to avoid potential conflicts. Also, the IRB has the ability to pull approval of a study at any time as they review these. The 3 tenets of ethical research put forth in the Belmont Report are respect for persons, beneficence, and justice. Respect for persons includes respecting one's autonomy and also protecting those with diminished autonomy. The inherent moral value of a person should not interfere with this bodily autonomy. Informed consent is required. Beneficence means not harming people, so potential harms must be minimized and possible benefits must be maximized. This means there should be an appropriate risk-benefit ratio. The investigator must ensure proper design of the proposed research, and then the IRB would evaluate whether the risks to participants would be justified. Finally, justice. Who bears the burden and who receives the benefits? Benefits must accrue to all. Denying benefits to those bearing the burdens is not justice. Informed consent is not simply a form to sign. It's a process, and subjects must be informed of their illness, what the potential risks are, and the benefits of the research, and that they have the ability to leave the study. Informed consent must be truthful and free of coercion, empowering the subjects to decide whether or not to participate. Cultural competency is imperative in reducing health disparities and improving access to proper health care. Diverse patients have different needs, and research must be respectful and responsive to these needs. Cultural competency will enable professionals conducting research to understand the needs of the participants and allow for an inclusive partnership. Avoiding an unethical situation in research. Cultural competency. Researchers must be aware of the needs of the human subjects and respond accordingly. Without it, investigators may impose their own beliefs, values, and behaviors on the diverse participants. One must ensure that the patient and the subject is informed. Informed consent is a process and is dependent on accurate information, understanding by the participant or the subject, and willingness to participate. We must ensure no coercion. Participation in a research study must be completely voluntary and free of any coercion. In the Tuskegee syphilis study, the men were offered things they didn't normally have access to and were unduly influenced. This behavior must be avoided at all costs. Follow the requirements put forth in the Belmont Report. Respect for persons and their autonomy. Beneficence means to do no harm and maximize benefits and minimize potential harms. And justice. Those who bear the burdens must also reap the benefits. Participants first as a driver. Just as medical professionals put patients first, human subjects should be the driver in any research study. Conclusion. When the Tuskegee syphilis study was exposed in 1972, 40 years after its inception, the nation was in shock. While we've learned lessons and made changes to research protocols, nothing makes up for the lives lost and the lasting impact causing mistrust of the healthcare system for 12 to 15% of the U.S. population. The path forward must be based on ethical behaviors on the part of the researchers and public health services.